Hello and welcome to this video that shows you how a weighted grading system works. Weighted grading, what does that even mean? So if you're taking a class, usually there's one of two ways that the instructor will figure out the grades. There's a point system and there's the weighted grading system. So let's look at both and so you can kind of understand. But we're really going to focus on weighted grading because that seems to be it's a point of confusion for some students. So let's go ahead and take a look. So let's go with what's kind of more familiar with points for students rather. Okay, the idea that certain things are worth certain points. So let's take a look. You know that assignments are given a certain amount of points. Because not everything is worth the same, because some things are harder than others, right? Okay, and some assignments may be worth more than others, as I just noted. And then the grade is determined by the total number of points earned divided by the total points possible. Okay, so that's the typical grade by point system. Let's take a look at an example of that. Okay, so let's say you have the first assignment is a quiz and that's worth 10 points. The second quiz is worth 10 points. And then let's say you have a journal assignment that's worth 30 points. And then you have a research paper which is worth 100 points. So clearly, the research paper is, worth a lot more than any of these other assignments. And if you add up all the total points, you get to a total of 150 points. So these are the points possible that you could earn on the assignment. So let's take a look at an example of what could have happened here. Okay, so let's say on quiz 1 the student got 8 points on it. Okay, on quiz 2, ooh, they rocked it, they got 10 points. On the journal assignment it was 30 points, they got 21 points. That's actually 70%. Okay, it looks like it's not too bad. Okay, and then on the research paper they did well. They got 90 out of 100. Okay, and then on so their total points would be so out of the 150 points possible, they earned 129 when you add up all these different things. Well, what grade is that? Well, if you take 129 and you divide it by 150, you get an 86. So the student would have earned a B in the class. And they're like, well, wait a minute, but I did really well on this research paper. And, yeah, but when you consider that you got a 70% on the journal assignment and, an 80% on this one, so that kind of shows you how the point system works, okay? Most people understand that as, as far as how you can add up grades, okay? So that's one system, the point system. Now we're going to talk about the weighted grading system, which is similar, but a little different. Okay, so weighted grading, I think the best way to kind of visualize this is that you have a bunch of buckets. Okay, a bunch of buckets. Now each bucket is not doesn't weigh the same, hence the term weighted. Okay, so let's take a look at it. So let's say that this bucket's weighs 15% and this one is worth 25, 15, 15, 15, 20. When you add all these up, okay, it comes to 100%, but not every single bucket is worth the same amount. And that makes sense because if you think back to the quizzes, some quizzes are worth 10%, and like the quiz is worth 10 points, right? But the research paper is worth 100 points. Well, that makes sense that some of these buckets are going to be way more than others and have a bigger impact on your grade. Okay, well, inside these buckets, we assign different categories. And so, for example, let's take a look at some categories. So let's say attendance is worth 15% of the grade, and quizzes and journals are worth 25%. Let's say you have 3 papers to write for the paper, for the class rather. Paper 1 is worth 15%, paper 2 is worth 15%, paper 3 is worth 20%, and let's say you have like a final portfolio which is 10%. Okay, so basically if you're doing assignments throughout the course of the semester, whatever you do is going to go into one of these buckets. So if attendance is worth 15% of the grade, basically to earn the full 15% you have to show up every single day. Yeah, okay. And that's kind of just the way it looks. Okay, so now let's look at another example here. Okay, so again, we'll look at it in a list format. So again, attendance is worth 15%, quizzes and journals 25%, paper 1 is worth 15%, paper 2 is worth 15%, paper 3 is worth 20%, portfolio is worth 10%, total of 100%. Okay, so these are the different buckets, as it were, right? And they're weighted a different amount, but they all eventually are going to add up to 100%. Now let's imagine that, let's see how someone did. Okay, let's pretend it's the end of the semester and let's see how they did. Okay, well, again, we look at these buckets and we understand that there's going to be, let's say there's going to be a whole bunch of quizzes and journals. So even though, and let's say maybe paper one only has like a couple of assignments, maybe like the first draft, or maybe the first draft and maybe a peer review and maybe the final draft. So there may not be a lot of assignments in here, but it's worth quite a bit, okay? But there may be a lot of quizzes and journals, and there'll be a lot of stuff in there, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that's in attendance, but these other buckets may not have as many different things in them, although they do weigh the same amount. So at the end of the semester, let's say the student, they were there 13, of attendance. They came enough times where they earned 13%. So of the total of 15%, they showed up most of the days, so they got they earned 13%. On the quizzes and journals, they did pretty well overall on the quizzes and journals, and so of the possible, they earned, they got 23%. On paper one, they did really well. They got, they did pretty well on all the stuff that went into paper one. So in that category, they earned 14%. Paper two, they did pretty good, 13% out of 15. That's good. Okay. Paper three, very good. Again, paper three is worth more than paper two. Okay, and so that's gonna, that 18% is like, woo, that's nice. Okay, and the portfolio, again, they did very well. So when you add up all these percentages of what they earned, okay. Oh, look, they got an A. Woo, nicely done. Nicely done. Okay. So when you have this weighted graded system, you have to look at each bucket and say, okay, well, how much did you earn in each bucket? And then you add up the buckets and see what you got. Now, let's see what happens if things kind of go off the rails, okay? So let's say that you don't particularly like going to class, but you do your assignments and you can figure out what's going on. So let's say you show up about half the time for your attendance. But the rest of the stuff was kind of like you did, the same as the other student, okay, as far as these other assignments, as far as how well they did, right? Okay, so remember the other student got an A in the class, but you decided to show up about half the time. Well, when you add up all these points, well, no longer does this person have an A, they have a B, because one of the buckets really brought them down because they didn't show up to class, okay? And so that can really drag that down. It's like, well, I did really, really well on my assignments. Yeah, but also this was part of your grade, and that's why you got a B, okay? And let's look at one more example. And this is one that happens quite often, okay? So let's say attendance, they're doing well, doing great, okay? Quizzes and journals, man, they just rocked it. Again, they did very well. Paper one, fantastic. Paper two, really good. And then they're a little cocky, or they get kind of busy, or they get tired by the end of the semester, and they're like, you know what, I'm not gonna do paper two or three. I'm just not gonna turn it in. I'm not gonna worry about it because I'm doing really well in the class. I don't really need to worry about that one. And the portfolio, gosh, that's only 10% of my grade. That's no big deal because look how well I was doing at the beginning of class. Well, when you end up with all this stuff, they end up with a D in the class. But professor, I was doing so well in the class, and I was doing great, and I got really good scores in my quizzes and journals, and I came to class and stuff like this. Yeah, but if you don't turn in these assignments that are worth a lot of, these big buckets, your grade's going to go down. That is the concept that it seems a lot of students don't quite understand. It's like, yeah, okay, I mean, everything is important here, but especially the ones that are worth a lot of points. So if you don't do your final, big projects or whatever, if you don't do one of these papers, I mean, that's really going to bring it down. Think about it this way. If the total is 100%, and if you don't do something that's worth 20% of that, the highest you could possibly get in the class is an 80. Because if you get a 0 on something that's worth 20, that's the highest you can get. So really the key is to do something in every single bucket to get a good grade. Okay, so some final thoughts. We use the weighted graded system because it adds more flexibility. We can always add more stuff to the bucket or take stuff at bucket out, but the percentage, the bucket itself, doesn't ever change. So if we have let's say we are scheduled to meet, 50 times during the semester, but one of the days gets canceled, okay, well, that bucket's still worth 15%. We can just take that day out and it doesn't change the overall weight of that bucket. Okay, so that gives us some flexibility as opposed to, oh, now we got to change the total number of points because, coming to class every day was worth 5 points. Okay, so the overall adding doesn't have to be changed as if it would be in a point system. And weighted graded allows the student to see, and the professor for this matter, to see what they're earning in the moment at any given time. So the grade is going to show you what you're earning based on what has been completed and assigned at the time. So if you've been coming to class and you've been doing well in your assignments, you're going to say, hey, look, I'm getting an A in the class right now. Okay, but so you can tell at any given time how you're earning, as opposed to a point system where you would have to figure out, okay, well, based on the number of points I've earned, then I have to figure out how many points are possible, and you'd have to do the math. That's the downside of doing the point system. So that's the difference between the point system and the weighted graded system, and I hope this helps you understand the difference. There you go.